White Christians are not a monolith. Americans are not a monolith, right? There is a variance. You have the extreme left and you have the extreme right, and they make all the noise. But 90% of Americans, and I would argue probably in Europe as well, 90% are somewhere in the middle. Maybe slightly left, maybe slightly right, but they're not on the extreme. I don't know, most Democrats that I know and most of my followers don't want a 6'3" hairy dude with his toenails painted wearing a miniskirt teaching their 6-year-old about sex education, right? But they're a liberal Democrat, but they don't want that. That's the extreme. And then I know a lot of conservatives who don't think racism is okay. Like they think it's abhorrent. But again, you've got the extremes, and those are the ones, again, when you get into the woods of it, who owns all the social media now? TikTok's now owned by Larry Ellison, a guy who supports the IDF more than any billionaire in the world. Every other major social media is owned by one group, one ethnic group of people in the world. And so why do they amplify these extremes? Because that's how they keep their goyim enemy fighting each other, right? And they hate the America First movement. And they want to make the America First movement a racial white nationalist movement, which there are elements of that. But I argue all the time, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you should be America First. We shouldn't be sending money to Israel. We are $13 trillion in debt. Why are we sending money to Israel? Why are we sending money to Ukraine? It's not our problem. We have to fix our roads. We have a broken healthcare system. We have a broken education system.
Quick announcement before we begin. I want to let you know about a small but important change to how this show is going to work so we can stay independent and reach as many people as possible. From now on, every episode is going to be free for all for the first 60 minutes. There will no longer be a 1 in 3 episode paywall. For those who choose to support this work, the full extended version, including the deeper and more honest final segment, the second half, will be available to paid supporters. If you would like to join the people who keep this work independent and uncaptured, you can become a supporter using the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get into the show.
You are listening to the Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at .malik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
Charlie Kirk as well. That I remember. Yeah. I really liked it. We should talk about Charlie Kirk, but let's go a little bit more contemporary. Hegseth and blowing up boats and second strikes. People don't know if people don't know what I'm talking about, can you fill them in? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so we're at war with Venezuela apparently. And there's a whole, rabbit hole that you can go down with that one as to why. It's pretty obvious, but the obvious reason is, the oil. They have the largest oil reserve in our hemisphere of the planet, and they're not playing ball with the U.S. corporations and oil industry, and they want it, right? They've come out so many different times. We've had U.S. politicians blatantly come out and say, listen, within the next year, U.S. corporations in the oil industry will control Venezuela's oil for the next 100 years. So there's that aspect. And that's what everybody's focused on and talking about. But in reality, if that were true, why are we also going after Colombia, which has no oil to speak of? Well, the reason is both Maduro in Venezuela and the president of Colombia are anti-Israel. And they've made many speeches of being anti-Israel. They're pro-Palestine. And so you can't tell me that the United States is purely going to go invade them for the oil, though that's the cherry on top. But there's other countries that have oil that don't play ball with the United States. We're not invading them, but they're not anti-Israel. And so I think when you take the two combinations together, it's pretty obvious. I mean, you have Stephen Miller, who is the Assistant Secretary of Chief of Staff, right? And this dude who looks like a vampire villain in a 1980s B horror movie is blatantly Zionist Jew. He pretends to be. He makes a lot of the white conservatives in America think that he's a white supremacist nationalist when he's actually very, very Jewish. His wife is very, very Jewish. She's stated on her podcast many times that their whole aim is to protect and enrich Israel, not America, not Americans, and they couldn't care less about white nationalist Americans either. But the sad thing is, in my country, the white nationalist Americans are so stupid that they will literally believe that Stephen Miller is on their side, and he's not. So this whole striking the boats, what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is they're trying to get a response out of Maduro in Venezuela. They want him to make a mistake, and the mistake would be to fire back on a U.S. military naval ship or a base. And if he does that, now you have the pretext. You can start beating the war drums, and the Americans are still going to get behind you, not in a majority, but enough to justify invading that country, which we're already getting ready to do. I mean, if this was just about drugs and not seizing power in Venezuela, you would not send the USS Gerald Ford, which is the most advanced and most expensive aircraft carrier in the world. Like, you don't send that boat there for drug interdiction. And so it's very clear that the whole point of this is to get Maduro to react and to be able to launch a full-fledged invasion and overthrow of that government, since they've been trying to do it with the CIA and it hasn't worked. Maduro's grip is too strong. Well, where they've made the mistake is that Pete Hegseth bragged on September 7th of the first boat strike. Now, if you look at these boats, they're little dinghy boats with outboard motors that are literally 1,000+ miles away from the coastland of Florida, which is perceivably where they would be going. Well, if you know anything about outboard boats, they would have to refuel that boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean. They'd have to have another boat bring them fuel 20 times to make it there, if they could even make it there with the rough seas and not sink and die, right? These boats aren't made for being out in the open ocean. And he bragged about the strike. Well, the problem is a whistleblower gave, I believe it was the Washington Post or the New York Times or somebody, information that there were 2 survivors. And they ordered a second, and now we know a third and a fourth strike to make sure that there were no survivors. Well, this is a war crime, both internationally as well as the Uniform Code of Justice in the United States military, because it's failure to give quarter to an injured or defenseless enemy. Even if you could claim somehow that these are active combatants, even though they're unarmed, but simply because they're carrying drugs, that makes them an active combatant. Okay, if you're going to make that claim, fine. Once that boat was disabled and you have 2 survivors clinging onto the wreckage for their life, they're not armed, they're definitely not bringing drugs to the United States now because their boat has been blown up. Issuing that second order is a war crime internationally, and it is a crime within the United States military as well as U.S. law. You cannot do that. It's called murder. And so Pete Hegseth made the mistake of coming out and bragging that he gave the order, he watched the whole thing in Jubilee, and now that it's come out that they failed to give quarter and committed murder, now he's saying, "Oh no, I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I was only there for the first strike, and
It's
then I'm busy."
it's the admiral's fault.
Yeah, it's the admiral. It's Bradley's fault. It's not my fault. I mean, he was totally legal in what he did, but I had nothing to do with it. And Trump is throwing Hegseth under the bus, saying, I had no idea about any of it. So it's who's going to fall on the sword for the king scenario here. And it's clear that they've already made that decision, that it's going to be a highly decorated admiral who was following orders, though he should not have followed those orders. Because also within the United States Military Code of Justice, if you are given an illegal order, you're not allowed to follow it. That's not an excuse at your military tribunal that I was just following orders. You knew that that was illegal, that you cannot do that. And therefore, you should have refused to follow that order and take whatever consequences come, because they're going to be a lot less severe than murder. And so a lot of people right now are thinking, well, obviously Donald Trump's not going to do anything about it. Pete Hegseth isn't going to do anything about it against himself. The next administration, if it's a Democrat, should and will do something about it. And I say, don't hold your breath, because you already have Hakeem Jeffries, who is the House of Representative minority leader for the Democrats, coming out and saying, we're not going to seek to impeach Hegseth, which is Congress's right, right? They can, not only can they impeach the president, but they can also impeach the heads of these different agencies, like Pete Hegseth. What a lot of people don't understand is an impeachment is an actual trial, right? So first you have to get the articles of impeachment passed, and then there's an actual trial, and there are actual consequences for that trial. He's just clearly coming out and saying, "No, we're not going to do anything about this."
That's
And that's
because
why I say
it's because it's a uniparty system.
that's what I was just about to say. It's two sides of the same coin in the United States. And like everybody was super excited and happy about Mamdani winning the New York mayoral race, right? Well, this signals a lot of change, right? We're gonna get progressive, and I'm actually a conservative, but for the people on the progressive side, they're super excited about it. And then he comes out and says, "I don't think that we should primary Hakeem Jeffries." What happened to all the progressive movement? It's dead. You got elected. You got your cushy spot now. Now you're just gonna join the uniparty yourself,
Dude,
and that's the problem in American politics.
this guy Mandani or whatever his name is, people are like, oh, he's pro-Palestinian, he's this, is that. No, he's not. It's just the uniparty system knew that they were losing support, that the people were going away from them, so they had to give the people something, dangle something to bring them back in, and that's Mandani, and then they put all their hope and faith in him when he's just another apparatus of the uniparty system. It's as simple as that, mate.
Even if he is pro-Palestinian, which I think he is, but he's already signaled that now that he is in this position, at best he could become a House of Representatives, maybe even a senator for New York in the future, right? At best. But as it stands right now, he has absolutely no power. He's the mayor of a city. It's a huge city. It's the most wealthy city in the world. But at the end of the day, you're just the mayor of a city. You have absolutely no pull on international relations whatsoever, right? The whole, I would arrest Netanyahu if he comes to New York. On what grounds? You have no authority to arrest a foreign dignitary, even if they're wanted for war crimes in The Hague. The Hague has no authority over New York. So it's an empty campaign promise that people just gobbled up like, oh yeah, this is our guy, he's our champion. And I tell everybody, as a Muslim myself, and he's my Muslim brother, so I'm not trying to slander or dog him out or anything like that. But what I tell everybody is, once you get into politics, you either have to sell your soul or you're going to be assassinated. One of the two. Because the powers that be are not going to allow you to actually do any real change that threatens the power structure. Look at through all history. Anytime somebody has threatened the power structure, the power has taken them out. Kings have been assassinated. Queens have been assassinated. Like, there's no way that Mamdani is going to be able to implement this. It would take a massive revolution in the United States, the likes of 1776. You would have to have just a complete teardown of the entire governmental structure, tear up the U.S. Constitution, and write a brand new one in order to get real change in the United States. That's not going to happen, because no matter how bad it is in the United States right now, people are still too cushy. They're still they still have their jobs for the most part. They still have their mortgage. They still are saving up for their kids' college fund. They're still driving that ridiculously expensive car or truck that they can't afford. They still have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 credit card debt that they're worried about. Nobody's thinking about picking up arms and starting a civil war. That's just not going to happen in the United States. So what is going to happen is you have people like Peter Thiel, and you have people like Elon Musk, the tech bros, and they're going to take over this country. They already have, in a sense. And you're going to have a technocratic, authoritarian country where AI is spying on every single thing you do. And it's going to be like China, right? In China, you cannot commit a crime without being found guilty. because they have cameras everywhere, and in everybody's cell phone is a spy device on their own citizens, right? They have facial recognition that can pick you up in 7 seconds, find out exactly who you are, and track everywhere you go. Now, in
Yeah.
China, they had to do this because you had a major problem in China. As they were entering the Industrial Revolution, you had the 99% of the population were farm workers. They were very rough. They had a lot of issues of just throwing trash on the ground and stuff like that. But the CCP, they wanted to build a modern society. So in order to change the behaviors of the people, they had to become a surveillance state. So that if you spit on the ground, you're getting a fine like that. Well, they developed the technology to do it, and now people don't spit on the ground. Same thing if you look at Singapore, right? Singapore, if you spit gum, well, first of all, you can't even get gum in Singapore. But if you were to have gum and you throw it on the street, that's like a $500 fine, and they will know immediately, and boom, you're done. Everything in Singapore is a fine. You jaywalk, fine. Spit on the ground, fine. Don't show up for work right, you're probably getting a fine. And God forbid you bring in some drugs into the country, because then you're just dying, right? They don't play around. Same thing with China. That's what the technocrats like Peter Thiel, and he's on record of saying this, that once we implement this technology, citizens will behave correctly. Police will behave correctly. Everybody will behave correctly because we'll know if you don't. And that's where we're headed right now.
Yeah, it's difficult to argue with all of that. Yeah, I agree. We are kind of heading that direction. So listen, Trump. Why are you not a fan of Trump? Like, let's play devil's advocate. People keep telling me, oh, forget Trump on this issue or that issue. He's done so much good in such a short piece of time. I know he hasn't stopped the mRNA vaccines. I know he hasn't stopped the genocide in Gaza, but he's doing great work on the border and this and the illegals and blah, blah. I mean, is he doing any good work, or is that all just hopium, MAGA, delusional ideology?
It's all smoke and mirrors, right? I made a video about this yesterday where I said, listen, I'm not anti-Trump because he's Trump. As a conservative American, I want to see a conservative president be successful. But that's not what he is. First of all, you have to understand that Donald Trump was a liberal Democrat his entire life until he ran for president, right? He talks about the Clintons, but it's all a game with these people. Once you're a billionaire, politics goes away. You're all going to the same golf club, you're all going to the same parties, you're just hanging out your butts. But you have to play like we're enemies, because you have to keep the population split between liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. So he's not a true conservative. What he is doing is he's pandering to his base. He is a master manipulator of stupid people. He can't manipulate smart people, and he said this, right? But stupid people, he can spin them around his fingers, no problem. So the immigration, the ICE raids, all of this, it's all for show. Because in reality, they haven't deported any more than what Joe Biden did in his first year. The numbers are roughly the same, despite the fact that they just gave this ICE agency something like $74 billion over a few years, like $24 billion this year, to ramp up all of these ICE raids. That's more than the GDP of some countries, and it's more than the military budget of some modern Western countries.
What does
They're
ICE
giving
stand
that
for? What does ICE stand for?
ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, right? So they were created, I believe, in the 1980s as a arm of basically what is now the Department of Homeland Security, but they were created as an arm to basically border patrol, but they can go deeper into the country, right? Border Patrol can only act within 100 miles of the border. They have no legislative authority outside of that. So ICE can act anywhere in the country. And that's basically their role, is to deport people who are seemingly here illegal. Now listen, as a retired contractor who dealt with Latinos in the workforce building homes all day long, I can tell you two things. First, most of them will have one person at the top who's legal. And that's the person who owns the company. They fill out the LLC, all that. Sometimes it's a girl who knows nothing about construction, but her man from Mexico does. Even though they're here illegally, without them, no construction gets done in the United States. There will be a housing shortage unlike anything we've ever seen, because I could not hire Americans to come and do the work that the Mexicans would do. Americans would show up for a week. They'd beg me for an early check, and I knew as soon as I gave it to them, I'd never see them again. Sure enough, I'd give it to them because I got a big heart. I know what it's like to be down and out, and then they don't show back up to work. But the Mexicans, they're there at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and they're staying there till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night in the summertime, working their tails off. So if we deport all of these people, we're gonna have a massive food shortage because there will be crops that are just rotting in the fields because nobody's there to pick them, and they're trying to develop all this robotics and stuff that can replace these workers, and that's all fine and dandy on a small scale, but we're not there technologically yet. Maybe in 5 to 10 years we will be, but we still need humans picking those apples and those lettuce and all of that stuff. Machines aren't there to do that yet. And then in construction, we already have in the United States a massive shortage of qualified contractors in this country. It's a dying trade. Nobody wants to go into it anymore. Everybody wants to be a social media star, right? That's why I went into social media. So we're losing for every qualified contractor, especially our specialty contractors like plumbers and electricians and HVAC guys. We're losing 3 to every one that gets replaced. So we're in a net deficit of contractors. Within the next 10 years, 30% of our entire qualified contractors in this country will have retired. 30%. So in 10 years, when you call a plumber, they'll say, yeah, I can get to you next month. Not tomorrow, next month. Why? Because I'm booked out for an entire month because there's not enough. And so if the United States deports all of them, we're in a major problem here. So Trump understands this because he's also a contractor, right? He's not like me where he actually had to qualify and build stuff, but he builds buildings with bank loans and hiring contractors. So he understands that the workforce needs Mexicans, and he so much has said so. And that's why they're not actually deporting the millions of illegal construction workers. They do these big raids for show. They pick up 30 or 40. But they're not deporting 3 million illegal contractors because it would destroy the entire economy overnight. It'd be done. And so it's all show. And this is why I support that if you're here illegally and you're working and you're providing a service to this country, there should be at the very least a path to a legitimate green card, right? Maybe not full citizenship because you didn't do it the right way when you came, but at least you can get a work permit because we need you. And now what happens is contractors are going to have to pay their guys a fair wage, which in a lot of instances does not happen. Now with me, when I was in my company, I only hired qualified, licensed LLC legitimate businesses, but I couldn't control what they paid their guys, right? And I'm pretty sure most of their guys were not legitimately here in the United States. And so they're probably not paying them what they should be paid. And if you were to do that, you would solve 2 problems. Number one, you'd solve the construction issue because now these guys are going to get qualified to become electricians and plumbers and HVAC and not just framers and sheetrock hangers and painters, right? And that's going to help to solve the problem that we have. But you can't do that if you're pandering to the white nationalist base who wants all brown people out of America. So Trump is playing this little manipulative game where I'm going to deport all of these illegals, but secretly I'm not actually going to deport all these illegals because I know it would destroy our country. But I'm just going to pander. And what really irritates me the most, why I don't support him, is because if he would just cut, like, he's a lame duck president. After the midterms, Democrats are almost guaranteed to take over. He will get nothing passed through there. So what he needs to do is listen, just be honest with the Americans. We can't deport all these people. Instead, what I'm going to propose is a work permit for people who have jobs. And that's going to solve so many problems in our economy. But then he's like, well, I'll face backlash from my base. Who cares? You can't be president again.
And what about other stuff? Is there any other area where he is making progress? This is what I keep hearing from people. He's doing great work. I don't really know what he is doing that's great.
He hasn't done anything. I mean, he passed the big beautiful bill, which gave corporate tax breaks to the super rich and small businesses like mine, which is cool. I like that. I think that the tariffs are a complete joke because the tariffs are just a tax. You could call it whatever you want, but who pays for those tariffs? It's not the Chinese companies. It's not the European companies. It's the importer. The importer companies, who are American companies, have to pay that tariff. Then they have to pass that on to the company that they are importing for, whether it be Walmart, whether it be your tire shop, whatever it is. They then have to pass that tariff on to the customer in order to keep their profit margins at a healthy level. So who pays for it? The vast majority of Americans pay the tariffs. And who does it affect the most? The poorest Americans, because they have no choice. They don't get a tax break for being poor when they go to get a new set of tires for their car so that they can go work for their minimum wage job. They have to pay that tariff. And there was a big controversy in the state of Utah.
And by the way, it's funny you should mention tires. I mean, it's a freaking big outlay. You know, we're checking our monthly outgoings regularly. And, you know, I took my car to the garage for a service, and the guy was like, oh, you can't have your car back. You got illegal tires. You're completely bald. You need 4 new tires. And I was like, boom, £650, just like that. And then 2 weeks later, I take my other car, and it's like the same thing. Oh, you need 4 new, and they did. Like, I mean, the garage is a good place. Boom, another like several hundred. And it's like in a month, then it was like over £1,000 in tires. That's a lot. I mean, you know.
Well, that's because you drive a car, I'm assuming. I drive a Nissan Titan full-size truck. My tires cost me over $2,000
each.
No, for 4.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah. And because it's a truck, they don't last as long as a car either. So I'm replacing my tires every couple of years. Yeah, I mean it's gotten really, really ridiculous. And there's a reason for that with the tires, though, and it's an understandable reason. A lot of people don't know. There's actually a rubber shortage in the world. So as the world's economies have grown and industrialization has grown, so too is the amount of vehicles. Well, every vehicle needs 4 tires, unless you're driving a bike. Then you only need 2. Imagine how much rubber it takes to go on to, what is it, 70 or 80 million cars just I think is it in England, or it might be in the European Union or something, but in the United States we have 360 million vehicles.
Wow.
But we only have 390 million people. There's 360 million vehicles. Every single one of them requires 4 tires. So there's not enough rubber trees in Asia to supply all of that. So there's a major rubber shortage, and this is why tires have gotten so expensive, because it's now really expensive. They're having to make like synthetic rubber to mix in with the traditional rubber, which also is the reason why your tires don't last as long, because you're not getting that high quality rubber anymore either.
Interesting. All right. Trump isn't doing anything. You mentioned a couple of things. What was really interesting was I had no interest in talking about Israel, but your opening sentence, you started talking about Israel. I mean, whoever I speak to, Israel just seems to come into the picture. I mean, those guys, they seem to be behind a lot of the bad stuff that's going on in this world. Like, it just is. Like, it's just a fact. And what's really funny, sorry, just give me one sec, Mike. What's really funny is, like, any other country, if they behaved like Israel, whether it's domestically or internationally, would be absolutely crucified. Like they would
Yeah.
just be like a pariah state. They would make North Korea look like angels. Like they would just be like no one would touch them. Like they come and they come into your country and you have dual citizen politicians. They openly say their loyalty is to Israel. And you know, if you even mention this, mentioning this, I am now accused of being anti-Semitic. But you know, you take, for example, a nice little country like Greece. You know, if all the politicians were going to Greece and going up to that, you know, monument that they've got up there, the ruins, I've forgotten what it's called now, their, you know, Pantheon or whatever, and they go up there and they're kissing that wall, you'd be like, what's with all our politicians going to Greece? And then if all the politicians were dual Greek nationals or citizens, you'd be like, why is England or why is America like full of 90% of the politicians are like, or cabinet ministers are like dual citizens with Greece? Like, what the hell about? Why are we giving billions in pounds and, you know, 350 billions in the last 70 years to Greece? Like, I mean, we love Greek food, we love Greek culture, we love Nick and Nikita, but what the frack is it with Greece? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, you would be asking those questions, and then when you suddenly find that your media is owned by the Greeks and the politicians and the pharmaceutical companies and the Hollywood, and you'd be like, man, these Greeks, they get around. Like, what the hell is going on here? You'd have a conversation, but we're not allowed to have that conversation. But it's
I don't think it would be Hollywood though. I think it'd be Athens would.
Hi, everybody. A quick reminder about my consultation service. Are you feeling tired? Do you have low energy? Struggling to lose that weight or optimize your health despite doing all the right things? If so, I would love to help you. I've spent 25 years as a mainstream doctor and surgeon, and over the last several years, I've turned my own health around by exploring nutrition, lifestyle, environment, and alternative approaches. I now sit between both worlds, conventional medicine and holistic health, and that puts me in a unique position to help you see the bigger picture. These are calm, grounded, one to one conversations looking at health from a body, mind, and soul perspective. If this resonates, book a consultation via my website, docmalik.com, and let us get you back on track. Yeah, Athens. But you know, it's just freaking weird. But you know, you just can't talk about it. And the funny thing is, we can't talk about it. But I've heard people, Jewish Zionists, like in New York, sitting around tables, openly declaring how like they're in positions of power, they own the media, they own the Hollywood, you know, they made New York, New York's in their pocket, blah, 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 and they need to put New York back in their pocket, and they own the politicians. So they can talk about it like that. That's fine. That's kosher. But anyone else who just states the obvious, well, you're a freaking anti-Semitic, whatever. This is crazy.
I mean, there's a couple of things there. Like, number one, it's the same thing with African Americans here in the United States, where they can use the N word, but nobody else can, right? So with the Jewish population, they can use whatever they want, but nobody else can use it against them, and then they'll play the victim card. The problem with that is nobody's buying the victim card anymore. They've shown their true face to the world. I was just watching an interview with Hillary Clinton where she was at the World Jewish Conference, and she's saying that the real problem is social media. All these young, brilliant minds are being consumed by TikTok and other social media and making them anti-Israel, and they really fail to understand the history of Israel and the what really happened on October 7th, and why, you know, what's happening in Gaza isn't really a genocide, right? So she's, you know, she's just, again, once you become a billionaire, all politics go aside, and now it's just the status quo to protect the billionaires. And who has the most billionaires? It's the Jews. So you have to protect your financiers, your bankers, etc. And that's why all these politicians go and pander to them, because they're the one who hold the pocketbook. So here's the problem, though. She admits herself that the problem is that they're being propagandized. Listen, when you watch a child get blown to bits by a US made bomb, that's not propaganda. That's reality, right? And we've been broadcast an entire population of 2.5 million people, and every single building, I think they're at like 87% now of every building in Gaza is flat. That's not propaganda, that's a war crime, right? Even in the worst moments of World War II, England only had, I think it was like 20 to 30% of their buildings destroyed by Nazi Germany.
I think
That's,
no, maybe London, not the whole of England, nowhere near. No.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
Germany,
like London. Yeah, London.
yeah,
Right? So
Germany was
I'm like
destroyed.
comparative, when you compare
Yeah,
London to Gaza, only like 20 to 30% was destroyed. Imagine if London had 85, 87% of all of London was just on fire and flat. Like the entire world would lose its mind. But when it happens to brown people, it's okay. It's not a big deal, right? And I know a lot of people are like, well, how is
just
he a conservative and he's pro brown people? Well,
yeah,
because
you've said that a couple of times, and you've said that a couple of times now, and the funny thing is, I think that I think they've deliberately, and I think it's Zionist Israeli people have funded the narrative that what, they're all stupid Muslims, they're Neanderthals, and they're all like barbaric, and they're uncouth, and they're all misogynist, they've all got unibrow, they've all got one eyebrow, they're all ugly, they all got bad breath, right? They're all a typical Muslim, right? And they're rabid, you can't reason with them. Allahu Akbar, just crazy people. And then so therefore it's okay to murder them. It's all right to kill them. It's
they're
all
doing
right
the
to
same thing with the Venezuelans right now.
yeah,
It's
it's
the
all
same propaganda. The only
really.
difference is that they're Christian and not Muslim, but they're brown, so it's okay. So they're using that same playbook of demonizing Maduro's government. And I'm not an expert on Maduro. All I know is the basics of the fact that he inherited from his predecessor, where they had
Chavez.
nationalized the oil. Chavez, yeah, Hugo
Chavez.
Chavez. So the internal politics and all of that stuff, I'm not an expert on. I'm not going to pretend I am. But I see the same rhetoric against Muslims now being applied to Venezuela, which then gives you the ability to go attack, murder, kill, right? They're blowing up people on boats, which are essentially they're dinghies, they're fishing boats. They're blowing them up without giving any evidence of them being narco terrorists, right? Even if they were narcos, in the United States, there is no death penalty for importing drugs into the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. And so, but this is the thing. This othering is going on, where it's okay to legitimize and say brown people, they can die. But I saw a video of some Palestinian kids the other day, and they're all blonde and blue eyed, and you won't get that on mainstream media, because suddenly Western European people and Americans would be like, oh my God, they look like our kids. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, why are they walking around without a parent? And why are their homes destroyed? And why are they in rags? And why is this little blonde little girl, got a limb missing? Suddenly they're not just these other brown people. Now they're like your kids. Suddenly that might make your opinion of them change. So they've done a really good job of othering the Palestinians and making them subhuman and justify why they can be destroyed and killed. But that's a narrative.
Here's the problem, though, is so a lot of Israel continues to put this narrative out that they're not Palestinians, they're Arabs. Well, that just fundamentally goes against all historical narrative. The Palestinians are not ethnically Arab. They're ethnically Palestinian, right? There's a difference. So when Islam spread into Jerusalem, the inhabitants, most of them accepted Islam. They weren't like, it's not like a whole bunch of Arabs just moved there. The population became Muslim. And when you become Muslim, you learn Arabic because the Quran is in Arabic. So the national language then became Arabic. Just like Native Americans in this country speak English. Not because it's their native language, but because that was the dominant force over them. So this is why you see some blonde hair, blue eyed Palestinians, because they were there mixing with the Romans way before Islam ever came about into that land. And so the narrative that they try to spin is, oh, they're Arabs, they can just go to any Arab country. That's fundamentally false. If you go and you look at Sudan, right, you have the Arab Sudanese and then you have the Black Sudanese. That again is a misnomer. It's completely false. Arab Sudanese are still black. They're not the Arabs of Saudi Arabia. They are ethnically different. There's a mix, and this is why, like when the Arabs came to Sudan to spread Islam, they mixed with the population. They married women and all of that stuff. Men married their women, and they had mixed kids. And this is why you have some population of Sudan who don't look like the Darfurian, really black Muslims over there, because in Darfur, they didn't really mix with the Arab population. So they have some Arab blood in them, but they're not like just Arabs who came over and just kept pure Arab blood. That's not what happened. So again, it's their way of trying to make people feel like they're different. They don't belong to the land, when they actually belong much more to that land than any one of these Ashkenazis who came from Poland and France and Russia. Because I guarantee you, all of them don't have a drop of Semitic blood in their veins. Not a one. Netanyahu, that's not even his real name. He had a Polish name, right?
I
They
know.
changed their name when they come to Israel to sound
Milikowski
like
or
they
something
are.
like that. Milikowski.
Yeah.
Just like the Argentinian president, by the way. He's one. Milikowski.
The Mexican president,
Mexican as well.
Sheinbaum. Yeah,
Wow.
she's Jewish. Zelensky in Ukraine, Jewish. Why do you think the United States supported them so much? They actually have, and I'm making a video about this. They actually have a plan to make southern Ukraine a part of Greater Israel. They don't even hide it. And this is why a lot of the critics of Zelensky have come out and said that he has been attacking the Orthodox Church in Ukraine and arresting their priests, practitioners. There's like this full-blown suppression of Orthodox Christianity in Ukraine by this Jewish Zionist president, Zelensky. And they don't even try to hide it. And the United States quickly came to his defense. Why? If Ukraine fell to Russia, would it make any difference to the United States? No, not a bit. Nothing. We went there because Zelensky is a Jew. And because Israel and Zelensky's regime have a plan to make Ukraine a European sub-state of Israel. You can, like, if people don't believe me, please go and do your own research.
No.
Just type in Greater Israel in Ukraine in your search bar, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you will find it. They literally come out and they don't even hide it. They're like, this is our plan.
Isn't it also that's where the Khazarians were from originally? Okay.
Which is, they are just basically a cabal of converted Europeans into this, basically is a satanic sect of Judaism, right? There's been a lot of stuff, and I don't want to get too deep into the woods with it, but there's a lot of evidence out there that these Ashkenazi Jews are involved in some really sick stuff of baby sacrifices, buying children so that they can, sacrifice them. Some of them even say that the devil is actually God, not God. God is subservient to the devil. Like, it's pretty wild when you get deep into it. But let me just say this, because
That's wild.
I'm gonna get put up as anti-Semite of the year award. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Jew. There are some beautiful, wonderful Jews who are fighting for truth, justice, and peace around the world. Code Pink is led by one of them. She's a fantastic human being. But And I'll also say this: when it comes to the Jews, Ashkenazi or Sephardic, doesn't matter. One thing that they do really, really well is they take care of their own. So if you're a Jew, you can walk into any bank that is controlled by Jews and you let them know that you're Jewish and you get 0% interest loans. And they don't even look at your credit score. They just look at the business plan. If the business plan looks good, 0% interest, there you go, you're good to go.
Really?
Absolutely. Again, if anybody didn't thinks I'm just some whack job coming up with conspiracy theories, look it up, right? It is in their code because in Judaism, it is illegal to loan a loan to another Jew with interest. That is a major sin in Judaism. You can't do it. They, however, can do it to the goyim, the non-Jew. They can give 100% interest rate to a goyim, but they cannot give it to another Jew. And so they've set up this system where they make all of this money off of us, the goyim, and then they enrich and benefit and take care of their own community. There was a rabbi who was saying, it's really funny how stupid the white men are, because we convinced them to send their kids to a public school that we control, and we send our kids to Hebrew school when they are going to learn the real stuff, right? And we've convinced them to pay property tax so that they never own their property, while we get away without paying property tax the way that we've written the laws. And so they do that, right? Most Jewish kids don't go to a public school. Very few Jewish kids go to public schools, especially in the United States. They go to Hebrew schools, private Hebrew schools. Why is that? Because they want to indoctrinate their next generation to stick together, right? It's clan over everybody else, Jews over everybody else. At the end of the day, they will always support Israel. They will always support other Jews. The ones who don't do that, the ones who go against that grain, they're labeled as self-hating Jews and they're outcast from the system. So if that same Jew is labeled as a self-hating Jew and he goes to a bank and tries to get that bank loan, he's not going to get it. Only if you're with the crowd, right? Then you're going to get all of these benefits. And this is one thing I respect about the Jews, is they do take care of their own. I wish Muslims would do that. And I wish the rest of the world would do that, because I think that, this is why I'm an American first, Muslim conservative, white American, which is an oxymoron on several levels. But that's who I am. And that just goes to show that Muslims are not a monolith. White Christians are not a monolith. Americans are not a monolith, right? There is a variance. You have the extreme left and you have the extreme right, and they make all the noise. But 90% of Americans, and I would argue probably in Europe as well, 90% are somewhere in the middle. Maybe slightly left, maybe slightly right, but they're not on the extreme. I don't know. Most Democrats that I know and most of my followers don't want a 6'3" hairy dude with his toenails painted wearing a miniskirt teaching their 6-year-old about sex education, right? But they're a liberal Democrat, but they don't want that. That's the extreme. And then I know a lot of conservatives who don't think racism is okay. Like they think it's abhorrent. But again, you've got the extremes, and those are the ones, again, when you get into the woods of it, who owns all the social media now? TikTok's now owned by Larry Ellison, a guy who supports the IDF more than any billionaire in the world. Every other major social media is owned by one ethnic group of people in the world. And so why do they amplify these extremes? Because that's how they keep their goyim enemy fighting each other, right? And they hate the America First movement. And they want to make the America First movement a racial white nationalist movement, which there are elements of that. But I argue all the time, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you should be America First. We shouldn't be sending money to Israel. We are $13 trillion in debt. Why are we sending money to Israel? Why are we sending money to Ukraine? It's not our problem. We have to fix our roads. We have a broken healthcare system. We have a broken education system. I just seen a news report yesterday where China has now mandated that every 6-year-old in China, remember that's over 1 billion people, every one of their 6-year-olds, the second they turn 6, will now have mandatory studies in AI development. Imagine in 10 years when they're 16. These kids are going to be producing things that are unworldly, while Americans are still debating what amount of screen time their children should have on TikTok.
No, what gender they are.
Or what gender they are. You know what I mean? So they're becoming so much quickly more advanced than the United States. Everything that the United States puts out, China puts out a better version now. It used to be you buy from China, you're buying cheap and you're buying crap. Now you buy from China and you're getting the most advanced stuff. This is why it's illegal to import a Chinese car to the United States, because they would destroy the US car market overnight. Their cars
Really?
are so much more advanced than ours.
You can't import a Chinese car?
Nope, it's illegal. Illegal.
Wow. Talk about
I mean,
what happened.
you could
What happened
import
to
it,
what
but
happened
you
to
could
free?
never drive it.
What happened to free trade and all that kind of stuff?
It's protectionism. They know that. So, for example, and I understood why they originally did this, because we manufacture a lot of the parts for our cars in China, and China just stole all those designs and started manufacturing their own things. 20 years ago, there was an article in I think it was USA Today, or Time Magazine. I can't remember. It's a long time ago, but I remember the article. So they took a Ford Escort, which is, a family sedan car, took a picture of that inside and outside. China, one of their auto manufacturers, had developed the exact same vehicle, but it had a Chinese name slapped on it. Everything was identical, no changes whatsoever. So they basically just stole the plans, stole how to make all the parts, and they just recreated the Ford Escort, right? And so the American Congress said, hey, this is why we can't allow them to import their cars, because they're going to import the exact same car that our manufacturers are making, but they're going to import them for 50% less. And it'll destroy our domestic manufacturing of our vehicles. And once that happens, we lose all sovereignty, because if you can't manufacture your own vehicles, that basically means that you're now a third world country. If you look at most third world countries, they don't manufacture their own cars. And they're third world countries. First world countries all have a domestic auto manufacturer. So it's like a prestige, but it's also a technical ability to build whatever you need to build. If you can build a vehicle, which is one of the most complex machines in the world, you can build anything. And so that was the initial thing. But now China doesn't steal designs from America anymore, because our designs are subpar to theirs. And I was arguing with a guy, he was a history professor a few years ago. And I told him, I said, listen, China is going to overtake America in technology within 10 to 20 years. And he said, absolutely not. It'll never happen. America is the greatest country in the world. We will never go down. We are too far ahead of everybody. And I said, here's why my argument is going to hold water. For every one engineer that the United States produces through our university system, China is putting out 100 of them. When you have 100 engineers to one, it is inevitable that they will create better technology than us, because it's simple math. They have the numbers, and they are still doing it to this day. China's focus on mathematics, science, engineering, and now AI engineering has been a key to their revolution in economy for the past 40, 50 years. They made it mandatory. This is why, like my kids in Singapore, they didn't go to an American school. I could have brought them and had them over here in American schools. I wouldn't do it, because the schools in Singapore are so much more advanced than the schools here in the United States.
Yeah, but you know what? The problem is also their culture is not great. Singapore is not a good example. Singapore is a globalist city-state. It's been funded and supported by the same predator class of people. It was taken off of Malaysia, and it's run by one family, the Lee family, and it's got this like pseudo, democracy, the assembly, but it's the family. It's the one family that rules it. It has been this one party that's been ruling it for the last 50 odd years, and they've modeled the city. Basically, it's all about consumption. All they want their workers to do is buy, shop, eat, drink, and they give them a relatively good quality of life, but they trade their freedoms and their true sovereignty for that bit of comfort, that materialism. And Singapore, they're all heavily indoctrinated. their schooling system. You know, there's no critical thinking. They create these little robots, and yeah, the robots are very efficient, very smart, very intelligent, but it's not the kind of place you want to grow up. You want your children to grow up free thinkers and critical thinkers. And Singapore for me is like, no, that is like, and they're adopting the digital twin city, the 15-minute city. They're signed up to all the WEF bullshit sustainability goals, the UN sustainability goals, and all that kind of stuff. They are part of the globalist parasite network, as far as I'm concerned.
So it
FY.
depends on what set. Well, obviously, everything about the government is true, and they did just have a very close election where they almost lost power, but they somehow were able to manage to maintain it, despite the fact that they're not popular. But it depends on what segment of the population you're from. So it's broken up between the ethnic Malay Muslim population, which are a minority in their own country. Then you have the imported Chinese, who are the majority. And the imported Chinese have a very supremacist mind state, but they do it in a polite way, right? So politeness is like a part of the culture. You have to be polite, whether you're whatever ethnic group you're from.
Whether you're stabbing someone in the chest or not, you have to do it with a smile.
Right. And so
That's your little
what
cat.
we did with our kids,
by the way,
is
that's your lovely cat meowing next to you, isn't it?
yes, she wants to go outside. Let me let her outside so she'll calm down.
I can hear her.
I like to be outside.
I often have my cat sitting on my lap, but she's staying inside the house today. Normally I'm doing a podcast with her.
My youngest cat, he's just laying on the bed being lazy and sleeping, but our oldest cat, she does not like being inside for more than a couple hours.
Gotcha.
But so what I was saying is, what we did with our kids is we sent them to their what we would call like elementary in the United States. We sent them to their elementary school levels of schooling in Malaysia, where their grandfather lives, or did. He passed away last year. That way they were well grounded in a whole different scenario of not being a consumerist, right? But then when we sent them to their education, their college education, we sent them to the technical universities in Singapore, because the mathematics and the science are just far superior to what they have in Malaysia or in the United States. So we kind of came up with a plan to make sure that they were grounded in religion, family, ethics, and not being a consumerist, but also at the same time, we wanted them to have the top-notch education, which was also affordable, because trying to get that education in the United States, again, subpar compared to Singapore or China, but 5 times more expensive. And it worked out pretty well. All of our kids have degrees. They're all able to utilize them, and I think they're better, well-rounded people. But at the same time, all of our kids don't like living in Singapore. I don't like Singapore. For me, I'd rather have big spaces and stuff like that. But it's a very cramped city. You have people on top of people. Again, everybody's super polite. It's, everything is, readily accessible, and there's a lot of convenience to it. But I don't like being crowded like that. And my kids don't like it either. They prefer Malaysia. But that's why I said, like, in the United States, we are failing in education. And this is going back to Donald Trump, this is another problem with him. He wants to get rid of the Department of Education. Okay, what are you going to replace it with? Because if our kids are just dumb because they're just learning about, white nationalism, which is what you want to push, then China's going to overtake the United States in 10 years in everything. They will be the dominant global superpower. Yes, we'll still have nuclear weapons, but they will eventually develop a technology to neutralize our nuclear weapons. And then at that point, what do we do?
Some people are arguing that nuclear weapons don't even exist. I'm going to share something with you. Have a look at this. This guy. Look at this guy. Let's see if it works.
come. You often said that, or is it ready to come? You often said that Zionism
There.
is
So
economic
this guy
growth.
is a venture
When we talk
capitalist,
about
Michael
the possibility
Eisenberg.
for 1 million
He's left
Jews
America for
moving to
Israel, and he's
what
telling
is
Jews thinking
the
of leaving New
economic
York to
logic
skip Miami and come straight to
behind
Israel.
such a vision?
But the key
And
thing he
why is
says is
now
you
the
can
right
stay
moment?
here in New York in a declining
So, first
empire,
of all,
or you can
immigration
come
in
to
general
Israel.
always
And he
adds
predicts that
economic
Israel will
growth,
overtake
except when you
London
bring
as a
in
second
what's
capital
called less
finance
qualified
within a short
immigration.
decade.
But all immigration
I mean, that's what everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about basically it's the end of the empire. The US is just it's twilight years now.
Yeah. Every empire has its peak, and the United States had it after post World War II. After that is just decline, right? And so the United States is steadily declining. And at some point, the United States will eventually break up. And this is why the white nationalists want to get rid of everybody that's not a white nationalist, because they think that that's going to save them, but it's not. You've already surpassed the threshold of being able to remove everybody that's not white, because whites are only 51% of the United States population, which means 49% are not white. So if you try to remove 49%, they're going to unite, and then you're going to have a bloodbath in this country. The other problem is there are more guns in the United States than there are people. And white nationalists have this false sense of security that they're the ones with all the guns. But I got news for you. The latest report that just came out about 4 months ago, liberals are buying guns in droves like never before. And so the paradigm that the white nationalists have all the guns and the military and the police, and the liberals are a bunch of pink-haired wussies who aren't going to be able to defend themselves and we can just take them all out, you got another thing coming, because a lot of liberals are seeing what's happening and they're saying, I'm going to arm myself. I'm going to adopt the Second Amendment. I'm going to stop being anti-gun, and I'm going to go and I'm going to train and I'm going to get proficient in guns. So if the day ever comes where a bunch of KKK show up at my door trying to lynch me and my family, I'm going to be able to defend myself. And so as the empire continues to decline, what you're going to see is the same thing that happened in the Soviet Union, where you have all of these blocks start to break away because they're ethnically different from the Russian bloc in Moscow, right? And I think that you could see that in places like Michigan, New York, California, where they start to break away. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think we probably are anywhere from a 25 to 50 year period where eventually that's what the end case scenario is going to be, because China is going to dominate, right? And the United States economy is going to falter. The entire economy is based on the global dollar. And the second that that is no longer a thing, the United States has no power. We have military bases, sure. But what happens when you have AI that is so advanced that it can nullify all of your technology? That's what China is trying to build right now. And they are getting closer day by day, while the United States is spending, for example, OpenAI is spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to build their data centers and build out their, next Chat GPT 5.1 or whatever. Kimi 2, which is a equivalent to ChatGPT 5.1, beats ChatGPT 5.1 in every single regard, and they built that thing for like $6 billion. OpenAI spent like 30 billion to build that thing. So it just goes to show that, again, it's that scale. They have a larger population, and they have mandated that that population be proficient in science, mathematics, robotics, and now AI. So the United States doesn't do that. And that's why our empire is going to continue to decline. And this is why the Israelis are trying now to divert away from the United States, because they see the writing on the wall that the United States is going to fall. They need to get with Asia. And that's why they're trying now to get better relations with China. The problem is China knows who they are, and they don't need them. They don't need the Jewish bankers. They have it all set up themselves. Remember, China was the world's largest and longest empire well before the Roman Empire or even the Ottoman Empire. The Chinese Empire was the dominant empire. So they still have that imperial mindset that we don't need anybody. We're Chinese. We can do everything. And I don't see a bright outcome for the United States in the long term.
Well, that's very bleak. Well, and it's the same with Europe right now. I feel, but I feel like the powers at large are all deliberately designing this controlled demolition. They're like the globalist parasites, whoever they are. They suck out the life force of their host nation or nations. And then once they think, right, we've done enough of this, they throw it aside and find a new host. And maybe China is the new host. A lot of these tech billionaires are married to Chinese people. I found that's interesting. But
Yeah.
maybe that's it. Maybe China's deliberately being allowed to rise in the East, and the West is deliberately being allowed to have its controlled demolition. And the funny thing is, these globalist parasites, they create the debt, they create the boom bust cycles, they destroy the culture, they do everything. It's all about destruction, rape, and theft. They don't actually create anything noble or beautiful. And then when everything does fall apart, they blame us, the plebs, because we didn't save enough, or we spent too much, or we were reckless or stupid or whatever. But they're the engineers of all this catastrophe. And then they profit from it on the way down, they profit from it on the way up, and they profit from it on the exit. Starting game. So they're actually quite smart, these globalists.
Yeah, look at the Federal Reserve in the United States. That was created by the Rothschilds, right? And it was created a system to where you would never be able to pay off the debt, right? And so the people that are in charge of the Fed are the ones who make all the money.
Yep.
You could never, like they said, every American, to pay off the U.S. debt, every American, man, woman, and child, would have to pay like $500,000 in taxes to pay off the national debt. Obviously, that's never going to happen. And Donald Trump loves to, and this is another thing that irritates me about him, is when he lies, it's so blatant that nobody believes him because the math doesn't add up, right? So he said that they've taken in, with the tariffs, trillions of dollars in tariffs. But the Government Oversight Budget Committee says they've only taken in 90 billion. That's a big difference between trillions in tariffs and 90 billion. Like 90 billion doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the $13 trillion debt that the United States has, and it grows
30
by the billions every day.
No, it's 30, almost 40 trillion.
Yeah.
Not 13, it's almost 40. 40.
Yeah. And growing every day in interest, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where Donald Trump is taking the message of Mustache Man in 1930s Germany. We all know who he is, but you can't say it on the internet. Where you just lie until they believe it. And sadly, and this is why I say the white nationalists are so stupid, because they believe it. If you look at my comments when I talk about these subjects, you'll get these white nationalist MAGA people who will come into the comments and be like, Donald Trump is already taking in $13 trillion in tariffs, and he's going to pay our debt off in the next 2 years. Well, if you believe that, I got an island in the middle of the ocean to sell to you, because you're stupid. I'm sorry, I don't like to be mean to people, but you're just stupid, and you can't fix stupid if you're not willing to learn. Right? That's not what's happening. The tariffs are not going to solve the debt. It is just another taxation on poor people, while the rich don't have to pay it. Imagine what's the big deal if in tariffs you spend an extra $200 a month when you're a billionaire? Nothing. You don't even notice it. But
Dude,
when you only have $50 left at the end of every month after all your expenses and your minimum wage job, $200 additional in tariff taxation is a huge deal for you. And that is millions of families in this country that are currently going through that and will continue to go through it, and it'll only get worse.
Yeah, 100%. And what really annoys me about the billionaires, not even the billionaires, the multimillionaires, is they don't even pay tax. They have these offshore accounts, they have trusts, they have all these weird financial vehicles. This is what I hate about the financial class of people. Like, they don't make anything. If you listen to that economic professor Werner, he talks about these bankers and everything. They don't actually add any net worth to anything. There is no gross domestic production. All this financial services business is basically taking our money, our cake, and they pass it along and take slices of it. Take a spoon.
Yep.
And then by the end of their passing it around, you're left with crumbs. And that's the financial system. And they have all these fancy vehicles and derivatives and shorts and longs and all these, bonds and, whatever. And there's science behind it, and, the funnel and this and that, and investing at the right time and betting the house at the right time and selling at the right time. But they control the levers, so they can engineer the crises and they can profit from it. And they create the bubbles and they create the contractions and they create the money out of nothing. And it's our hard work and labor that fuels the whole system, but they just keep taking the slice of the cake, keep taking it, and it impoverishes us. It saps us of our energy. Imagine if, I kept taking your blood, like 100 mils every single day. After a while, you're going to be anemic. You're going to be tired. You're not going to be able to lift your hand up and stop me from taking that blood. You just don't have the energy. You're just barely living. That's the state of humanity now. We are basically being harvested on a daily basis through taxation and all these other financial systems, while they know how the game runs and plays, and they don't pay tax. They can claim to be in debt, so they definitely don't get taxed. They can get government handouts, government contracts. They pay all the politicians, so the politicians write all the laws and policies. That means that their global corporations can deal with all the red tape, but small and medium-sized businesses get screwed. So, you can't compete with these big monopoly, corporations. So, and that's what they also want. They want all the small and medium-sized businesses destroyed. And it's not just because they don't want competition, because if you are a small and medium-sized business, if you're self-employed, you're kind of independent. Like you don't have a boss to answer to. I know you need to pay your tax and IRS and HMRC, but fundamentally, you are in control of your life. They don't want that. They want you dependent on the state. They want you dependent on their large globalist corporations. And if you say the wrong thing, if you tweet the wrong thing or post the wrong thing on social media, they'll come down on you and cancel you. So you've got your education debt, like £200,000 or dollars. You've got your healthcare bills. You're barely making, things meet in the end of the month. You're paying your rent. You can't afford to speak your mind and say something against the authorities. So you just keep your head down, you keep working, and you keep paying your taxes. That's what they want. And if that's not enslavement, I don't know what frickin' is, because that's frickin' enslavement. But these bastards, these billionaires and millionaires, they don't pay any fucking taxes. It's just like,
if you look
one
at
insult on top of another, Sorry, that was my little rant.
If you look at the taxation, the way that it's set up in both the United States and in Europe, the governments don't actually need your taxes. If that were the case, then governments wouldn't run a budget deficit, right?
If you want to hear the rest of this conversation and join our private supporter community, the link is in the show notes. Remember, folks, your support keeps this work free, independent, and alive, simply for the cost of one coffee a month. All right, folks, thank you so much. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.